Thank you for joining me in this webinar. There are many helpful webinars out there on this topic for psychologists, especially those created by the Australian Psychological Society, covering the technical requirements and considerations about which platform to use and some practical details about working online. What I hope to contribute to this ongoing conversation is emphasizing the value of your existing skills and strengths in moving into this medium, and greater references to the research about working with clients through video. As is appropriate in our Australian context, it is appropriate for me, to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Wandun people of the Greater Kulin Nation of the lands that I work in, and the other traditional owners of country throughout Australia, and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. If you haven't already, please ensure you have a preferred beverage and a snack with you. The various terms used in research studies have been many. For consistency, I will primarily use video counselling unless directly quoting another researcher's work where I will use their terms. There is one slide on online assessments, which of course is a much bigger issue on its own. It's understandable if practitioners are concerned about moving to a new medium for their work, particularly when that medium is not one they have been trained to work in professionally. However, there's substantial research that practitioners with little training continue to achieve similar client outcomes. Your strengths and skills, particularly in relation to forming and maintaining the therapeutic alliance with clients, is still central. A systematic review in 2018 found that although therapist ratings of the working alliance with clients was lower in video counselling from their perspective, client ratings did not differ. And more importantly, it didn't make an impact on outcomes, with symptoms reductions reported across both face-to-face and online. Backhouse, that was Norwood's work. Backhouse 2012 did a systematic review of 65 studies and found no significant differences with symptom improvements for anxiety and depression, PTSD, eating disorders, parent-child problems, gender reassignment, mood disorders, adjustment, and anger issues across face-to-face and video. Richardson 2015 made it very clear that telepsychology feels different to a typical face-to-face client therapy session, but does not necessarily feel better or worse. And even if all this research doesn't convince you, Noyce and Simpson found clients benefited from therapy from video counseling even when they rated the lack of a strong therapeutic relationship. With the rapid transition to service delivery over this medium, practitioners in response to COVID-19 around April this year, it is helpful to know that our whole psychology profession, like most other professions, have been doing this transition around the same time. So continue to nurture and draw on the experiences of each other at this time. Richardson found client rating satisfactions improve with all aspects of the telepsychology experience with time. Overall, the client ratings indicated an increase in positive feelings towards the therapist, the working relationship, and the intervention generally. Even with the easing of restrictions, it is likely that there will continue to be a future client demand for video counselling services due to its improved access, Bradford, etc., and particularly those that are underserved, such as those in poverty, those without easy access to childcare, or those working multiple and irregular shifts, as found by Cooper. Additionally, institutions and organizations see it as advantageous and inexpensive to service a broader population from a smaller number of centers. So that was the work of Lango, Ritzer. Now, in the midst of all this, as always, it is important to reflect on your current practice. What do you see as your strengths as a counselor? How do you establish rapport with your clients? What areas of interest do you often explore? What handouts, what tools do you prefer to use? Whether it might be things like a DAS or the emotional thermometer, or just, you know, aspects like the whiteboard or other handouts. It's important to think, for the most part, that how you prefer to work can still largely occur in some form through the video medium. Certainly, if you think of something you currently do that you don't think you can offer online, reflect on the why of that activity or action. What are its aims, rather than just focusing on what that activity is, because you might end up finding an alternative way of still achieving your same goals. There are, of course, some practical issues and contraindicators from research regarding using video as a medium for counselling. Certainly, some tasks cannot be accomplished over video, but often it's about rethinking how you approach things. Physiotherapists these days report being able to offer physical therapy over video. So and a later slide will talk more about assessments again. The most practical, of course, is whether clients have the IT capabilities, knowledge, and access to the technology. Recent COVID-19 restrictions have saw many families improving their access to cope for the longer term. But of course, don't assume that all clients have the equipment. But also don't assume the opposite either. Some, older Australians have transitioned very, very well to this medium. As always, talk with your clients. There are also many reasons, where video will be paired with telephone work as well. Now, traditionally, the disabled has often had poorer access to professional help. However, the disabled have greater skills and motivations to use technology to access help these days, Christensen's work indicates. And also the ability to access additional assistive technology to receive and act on video counselling is available to them. It is understandable for some to be particularly concerned about dealing with people at risk to self and others. However, we know that a number of crisis lines like Lifeline only offer telephone and internet chat. So with video, there is still the potential to engage and appropriately respond. Further slides will cover what else is needed to manage risk in those times of crisis. In regards to symptomology, that are the contraindicators to offering therapy by this medium. Simpson and Reed highlight certain personality characteristics from their very small sample of clients that perhaps those who are paranoid and avoidant, those with difficulty trusting others, or those who lack social confidence may be impacted by their client engagement because of their fears of being watched or recorded. However, Kozics and Yellowlees found for clients with disordered personalities that greater treatment attendance occurred due to the medium's access of convenience and having an increased sense of, for the clients, of comfort and control, and also having that greater access to the therapist in many ways, or at least the presence of the therapist for many of them, address much of their abandonment fears. Sharp et al. Found that psychotic patients reported reduced anxiety using counselling because of the increased physical and psychological distance that video counselling provided them. Cooper 2019 highlighted that although counsellors could deliver services, there were certainly clients that are of high risk, and counsellors had to decide whether they wanted to work with those certain clients, particularly those with a history of non-compliance with treatment, hospitalizations prone to violating boundaries, and those with issues of stable accommodation, particularly for ongoing monitoring and progress. But Cooper was more highlighting that that was an issue for the counsellors to decide whether or not they wanted to deal with clients of higher risk, rather than suggesting that video counselling wasn't appropriate, wasn't the most appropriate medium. It just said counsellors might just have to work harder with those clients, obviously, with that. Certainly, in terms of risk management, most of these areas have been covered particularly well by previously available webinars like that of Aaron Frost, and the resources available from the APS, such as their checklist of what to do when you start a session. Although it hasn't come up anywhere else Again, please be conscious of complying with copyright issues while we're delivering our services online. At the start of the call, as I've mentioned, this is similar to the checklist of the APS. Confirm these elements. So the APS also explains, have explanations for each of these. Certainly for existing clients where you have changed venue, it's helpful for them, for you often to acknowledge the change of venue, why the space has become different for them. Again, when we look at practical considerations and setups, consider these. If you're working from home, you might not have considered as much what is revealed by your webcam in your background of your sessions. Depending on your client characteristics, you might want to consider how something as innocent as a family holiday photo might lead to communicating differences of wealth or assumed gender expectations, etc., those kind of things. Again, here were some more practical considerations for setups. Yeah, look at that at your leisure. Pause this video if you need to look through that. Certainly, a big question is, how does this medium impact on how clients perceive working with me? The main tools used to measure therapeutic alliances often looks at the dimensions of the quality of the working relationship, the bond that is, how aligned was the session for the client goals, and how effectively they worked on tasks together. The Working Alliance Inventory, the WAI, has been around since 1986, and the short scale measures this with 12 items. In 2003, the session rating scale was proposed, focusing on 4 questions of, that similarly in the same areas. And certainly video counseling is a different medium with different characteristics. Grondin identified the filtering effect of video conferencing can lead to the loss of nonverbal cues, reducing the degree to which empathy can be felt, conveyed, and perceived. So and also, as most counselors favored an upper body framing of the transmission, usually up there, Gronin highlighted that over 60% of gestures, arm movements, and aspects of your postures were often framed out of most of those video interactions. And so, there's obviously a loss there of information, particularly in how, if you don't frame yourself, in the way. Another effect to note is termed the online disinhibition effect, proposed by Sula, which is often mentioned in research as a negative in areas like online harassment, where individuals seem more free about their biases and aggression towards others. Sula termed this negative behavior as toxic disinhibition, whereas there were also accounts of benign disinhibition, where people seem more free about being honest, having greater, sort of and deeper self-disclosures, or more positive feelings towards others. Sula identified 6 disinhibition factors, while highlighting that his term of disinhibition is not meant to always suggest a greater insight into the true inner self, but again, how one's approach to self changes with the context. As Sula's work was initially regarding the mediums of websites, message boards, chat rooms, email and text messages, and video games, I've identified here the relevant factors for telephone with the icons on this diagram, as well as for video. So particularly the main factor is that web technology often minimizes status and authority, as the internet generally equalizes all by allowing everyone an equal opportunity to voice themselves. Everyone, regardless of status, wealth, race, gender, starts off on a level playing field on the web. So certainly, this minimization of status and authority, is significant. The other areas also has some issues to do, have parallels with, what we call transference, in the past. But we'll just skip that for this stage. An Australian systematic review of 23 years of therapeutic alliance in psychotherapy via video conferencing by Simpson and Reed overwhelmingly found that client rating bond and presence at least equally as strongly as in-person settings across a range of diagnostic groups. It is noted that both clients and therapists describe being completely absorbed by the therapeutic process without feeling distracted by the technology, with clients being more active and having high levels of initiative, spontaneity, trust, and disinhibition. Kozics and Yellowlees found clients rated video conferencing psychotherapy as being more egalitarian and collaborative than in-person therapy, reducing patient anxiety as they are seen from their homes or other familiar settings. They also found a greater sense of control over the interactions, and the filtering effect of video conferencing often provided them more safety to allow an increased sharing of intimacy. Therapy over the phone, Lingley, Potty, and McGrath also found that you could achieve an equivalent therapeutic alliance to face-to-face. So as all practitioners know, as with life, counselling doesn't always go to plan. Relax if things go wrong. Backhouse et al. Systematic review found that most dissatisfaction with video conferencing or video counselling primarily involved the technical challenges, but those issues had little impact on overall client satisfaction ratings. Video counselling does not need to be treated apologetically, defensively, or the poor cousin of face-to-face therapy, said Richardson. As practitioners who persevere with the technology long enough to feel confident using it and capitalize on its strengths are satisfied with it and its ability to produce equivalent outcomes. Yoon et al. 2013 found again that technical difficulties were not associated with treatment outcomes, and the frequency of technical difficulties decreased with use. No one expects psychologists to be experts in anything else than psychology. And the increasing research, like that of Noyce and Simpson, find that clients describe when counselors use self-disclosure techniques, they rate their relationship as more open and connected on a deeper level, particularly for clients from a racial or ethnic minority background. With the transition to this medium, it is helpful for practitioners to engage in self-calming, soothing before session, especially if you still feel discomfort with the medium or the technology or the processes involved. And so it is helpful for us just to slow our pace down and to pause often. To compensate for the filtering effect of the medium, Grondin suggested that we are to be more visual, to use less mms to avoid speaking over others, but to be more visual with more nods, more pronounced verbal and non-verbal cues, hand gestures particularly, versus your normal body language. And to engage in more reflecting, summarizing, and paraphrasing of what was said. Rees highlighted that the therapeutic alliance for telephone and video conferencing formats was predicted by the degree the counselor could identify the dominant emotions or thoughts being expressed. So that's where, refreshing those of you who have done telephone counseling in the past is helpful, doing more reflecting, more summarizing, more paraphrasing, more identifying that dominant emotion or thought that clients are saying. Certainly, systematic studies like Christensen has shown video conferencing telehealth improves access to care, potentially reduces costs, enhances patient satisfactions, and improves mental status and quality of life. Sternberg, 2018, found that rural individuals with disability were more likely to conduct online health research, although maybe currently less likely to actually do online health maintenance or their health monitored by those who versus those who are disabled. Certainly there are considerations for clients with disability. Hearing impaired, some video conferencing programs already offer a live captioning or subtitles feature. Certainly using chat to highlight key points or to share the screen, is useful for the hearing impaired. For the visually impaired, many of them are probably using assistive technology, with computers if they are familiar with computers, and again with them focus on the auditory counselling skills, more reflecting, more summarising and paraphrasing. For the physically impaired and the increased sensitivity, they're probably already using technology a lot more, possibly with modified equipment, as we know that online provides greater access than face-to-face for these clients. Those with learning difficulties, maybe ADHD or ASD, often they find it useful to share the screen to keep focused to the session. Whereas you might have done that with a whiteboard, you can certainly use that with the share screen option of most video conferencing or counselling programs. And certainly with anxiety, individuals with social anxiety disorder tend to be more willing to engage via video than face-to-face. So, there's a lot of advantages in using video with clients with disability. So certainly, using your share screen option, allows us to be more visual. It allows us to display tip sheets, handouts, templates, or checklists that you can email to them as well. Certainly with some templates, you could, again, use share screen to fill that in, or you could fill it in for them, or you could get them to fill it online. The whiteboard feature of the video platforms or a simple drawing program can, often be used to allow you to draw family structures or social interaction maps, and of course you can share YouTube, relevant videos as such with your clients. Certainly in terms of online assessment, there are a number of valid assessments that can be performed online. A systematic review of neuropsychological tests administration by video conferencing by Berely found the administration of verbally mediated tasks by qualified professionals using existing norms were supported. And the use of visually dependent tasks were also considered, to be quite aligned. Some variability in previous studies indicate a need for further investigation of motor-dependent tasks, but for the most part, these assessments are still considered valid. Video conferencing opens up more opportunities for particularly in situ exposure therapy and calming techniques within that domain. Work, sort of references that, and it was found that the usual stress of carrying out exposure work with clients with PTSD, which were previously avoided, who previously avoided tasks, sort of seemed to be a lot less and did not seem to interfere as much with the therapeutic alliance with video conferencing as opposed to face-to-face. Additionally, we can use people's own props for sociograms or discussions of significant individuals. Not only will that add more meaning to their discussions while you're having those discussions in the counselling, but can serve as persistent reminders after the session of the possible change meanings of those individuals going forward for the clients. Now, increasingly, mobile phone apps are widely recommended. Linodon et al.'s meta-analysis of 66 randomized control trials significantly outperformed control conditions in improving depressive and generalized anxiety symptoms, stress levels, quality of life, general psychiatric distress, social anxiety symptoms, and positive affect. They found no benefits for panic symptoms, for PTSD symptoms, and negative affect though. Now, most of these were based on cognitive behavioral principles and of acceptance and mindfulness-based principles. Now, outcomes were all self-reported and no long-term follow-up was done on this data. It is important to note that not all available mental health apps necessarily bring about positive change. Parker et al. In 2019 has highlighted that consumers should be aware that current Australian government regulatory framework is inadequate in regards to ensuring publicly available mental health apps support consumer privacy or their health safety. As the effectiveness or even the safety of any of these publicly available apps is necessarily evaluated, because it's, sorry, I meant to say that the effectiveness or even the safety of these apps is not necessarily evaluated or screened before they're released. So certainly it is important to make sure you be clear about which apps you're recommending and not just letting your clients just try anything out there. Now, certainly a PDF of this whole presentation is freely available from my website at andrewchua.com, where you'll be more easily able to read all these references I've mentioned in this presentation. And again, the APS has released a lot of great resources, and this PDF will have active links to all of these. In summing up, be kind to yourself. Take more breaks initially. Of course, it's an advantage to improve our familiarity with the practical aspects of this mode, but it's also helpful to more so improve our beliefs regarding what can be achieved as well. Simpson and Reed said to reduce the impact of apparent unsupported biases regarding the efficacy of telepsychology, psychotherapists should be encouraged to become aware of the current process and outcomes evidence that supports the use of this modality in psychotherapy. And hopefully, this presentation has helped you with that. It is also helpful for you, of course, to do regular continuous post-session evaluations, something like the session rating scale, to help you be assured that your work is valued by your clients too. So again, nurture and draw on your colleagues in this new journey of discovery of a broader professional skill set. And be assured your strengths and skills will continue to be fruitful in using this medium. I wish you continued learnings and joys with this. And thank you so much for your continual work in making the lives of others better.